Today on CJ Pony Parts, we're going to make this 2013 Focus ST handle even better on the road and track. The Focus ST is a great handling car right from the factory, and many people take their STs to Autocross or even the track. So today we're going to make this one handle even better by installing the Steeda Front Sway Bar. This Steeda Front Sway Bar is designed to fit the 2013 to 18 Focus ST. It features a larger 25.4mm diameter, which is 25% stiffer than the factory bar for improved handling and reduced understeer. It comes with a nice silver powder coat finish and includes polyurethane bushings and brackets. It'll make the Focus ST handle like a champ, so let's get to the installation. Tools needed for this installation: a lift and pull jacks or a jack and jack stands, 3/8 ratchet, 10mm socket, T30 Torx bit, 1/2" ratchet, 13mm socket, 15mm socket, 18mm socket, 21mm socket, an extension, 15mm wrench, 21mm wrench, and a 5mm hex key. The first thing you're going to do for this installation is get the car up in the air and remove the wheels. Then with a T30 Torx bit, remove the belly pan. Next, we're going to disconnect the sway bar end link from the sway bar with a 15mm wrench and a 5mm hex key. Move to the other side and disconnect the other end link. Next thing we're going to do is remove the two 10mm bolts securing the downpipe bracket. Alright, at this point we have the engine and subframe supported by pull jacks. Now we're going to remove the nuts and bolts on this rear cross member. Next, you're going to remove these 3 bolts right here on each side. On each side of the car, right behind the strut, there's a 15mm subframe bolt that needs to be removed. You can access it by going through the lower control arm. The subframe can now be lowered 2 to 3 inches. Let it down nice and gently. There's 3 bolts securing the subframe to the steering rack that need to be removed. The second bolt is right here on the driver's side. This one's a little tight to get to. The third bolt is in the back, right underneath the downpipe. You might need to bend the heat shield to get your socket on the bolt. The subframe can be lowered a little bit more. We now finally have enough room to get to the sway bar hardware. There's a 21mm nut and a 19mm bolt on each bracket that needs to be removed. Then move on to the other side. The sway bar can now be maneuvered out. Remove each bushing from their bracket and grease the bushing up with the provided grease. Slide the bushing onto the bar. Rotate it to make sure it's evenly lubricated. Put the bracket on. Do the same thing to the other side. The sway bar can now be installed into the vehicle. We're going to install this sway bar just like we removed the factory one. Make sure you line up the brackets and reinstall the factory hardware. Reinstall the 4 sway bar bolts, but don't tighten them until you get all 4 in place. Once you get all 4 bolts in place, you can tighten all the hardware. Now we're going to install all 3 bolts for the steering rack. If your rack and subframe are misaligned, you will have to push them to make them properly aligned. I'd recommend getting all 3 of the steering rack bolts started before tightening any of them, just to make it easier to get it all aligned. Bend down this heat shield. Now we can reinstall the subframe bolts. Raise the subframe up and reinstall the bolts. Then your subframe brackets. Reinstall the bolts for the downpipe bracket. Reinstall your crossmember. At this point, we can connect our sway bar end link to our new Steeda sway bar. Reinstall the splash guard. And now our installation's finished. Okay, we got our Steeda front sway bar installed. It's really gonna help this thing handle a whole lot better, and it will go perfectly with their rear sway bar. Installation's pretty time consuming, but it's not difficult. It's probably gonna take you 2 to 3 hours, and before you know it, you'll be heading down the road.